So welcome to those who have joined the session, the final breakout session of this afternoon. So we'll be looking at promoting sustainable travel. I'm joined by, I should say who I am first. I'm Claire, I'm Capacity Building Officer with the Climate Change team at Keep Scotland Beautiful. I'm joined by my colleague Magdalena, who works in the same team, and we're also delighted to be joined by Barbara from Sustrans. So Magdalena and Barbara will be presenting about a couple of different things, and after those presentations we will have the opportunity for a question and answer session. We ask that you don't click the blue button to appear on screen. At the Q&A session, there's two ways you can point. You can come on the camera and ask your question, or you can just type your question into the chat box. Also, feel free to type your question in as the presentations go along, and we'll aim to address that at the end, providing there is time. So without further ado, I'll pass over to Magdalena now.
Thank you very much, Claire. Okay, I'm just going to share my screen now. Okay, so you should be able to see now my full screen. And yes, welcome everyone, and thank you very much for joining this workshop today. I'm Magdalena. I'm Climate Action Officer at Keep Scotland Beautiful and also Development Officer for the Climate Challenge Fund. Today I will be briefly speaking about and sharing with you some of the main barriers that Climate Challenge funded projects that promote specifically sustainable transport have been facing during the COVID-19 pandemic, but also I will share some of the opportunities that they identified during this difficult time. So hopefully this will give you an idea how they've been managing during this challenging times. So first of all, I just would like to mention briefly about the CCF for those of you who might not know. The Climate Challenge Fund is a Scottish Government fund that supports community-led organisations in Scotland to tackle climate change and reduce local carbon emissions. And the fund is managed and administered by Keep Scotland Beautiful on behalf of the government. The fund was launched in 2008, and since then more than 1,100 projects have been funded all over Scotland in all the local authorities, and the amount that's been funded to communities exceeds £111 million. Currently, transport projects or projects that promote sustainable transport are 30, and they're located in 15 local authorities around Scotland. On our website there is a map that you can feel free to have a look and see not only the transport projects but all the currently funded Climate Challenge projects around Scotland. They're great, they do great work, and it's really worth having a look at that. And why is community action so important, and specifically the transport groups that are delivering CCF projects? We know that Scotland has committed to net zero emissions of all greenhouse gases by 2045. And we're expecting the climate change plan to outline how we're going to achieve that. Unfortunately, it's been delayed due to COVID-19, but certainly community groups have a significant role to play to move towards a net zero target by encouraging people to adopt low carbon behaviors. And transport, according to the most recent report, was one of the largest sources of net emissions. This is data for 2018, making up more than a third of the Scotland's carbon emissions. So that's why really CCF groups that promote sustainable transport have a really crucial role to play in order to help us get to the net zero emissions target. And just a little bit of a background, less than a year ago, myself and a colleague of mine from Keep Scotland Beautiful decided to, develop this video guide that would collect tips and hints from already funded in the past or currently funded transport CCF groups to help new groups to deliver very successful transport projects. And we wanted really to share what makes a sustainable transport project successful and what groups can do to engage more people. And some of the main points we highlighted was how important it's really to focus on group activities, getting together, but also collaborating with other local organizations, local council, and working with schools and nurseries, but also how important it is to be present, be visible, and join local other events. Also, how important it is to communicate the link between climate change and transport, and also how essential is really to have a face-to-face interaction, because that would make the engagement more successful. And yeah, unfortunately, we really didn't know what was ahead. And in March this year, the month that everything changed, all these things that we highlighted as really important, that groups highlighted that have been very important for them to engage with the communities, were really challenged. Closure of schools and nurseries made it very difficult, if not impossible, for these groups to deliver their activities in schools and nurseries. But also the closure of social venues made it impossible for a lot of planned events to happen. They were cancelled, and social distancing was introduced, and also the topic of climate change was communicating the topic of climate change was challenged, because there was another global crisis, which was health crisis, that we had to face, and we're still facing. So that made really the communication of climate change even more difficult. And then there was a lockdown, and people didn't really travel, didn't really commute to work. So transport groups were really struggling on how to promote commuting to work, in a more sustainable way when people are not really moving at the moment. So yeah, some of the main barriers that are quite relevant not only to transport projects but to all CCF projects are that groups had to focus on smaller scale engagement, and that's of course due to the restrictions that were imposed. And then they also had to adapt their activities in a way that are safe, delivered in a safe way. So that means providing extra training for staff, but also making sure that there is a risk assessment in place that refers to the current situation. And also some of the groups, especially in the beginning of the lockdown, mentioned that online meetings were not always as effective as meeting face-to-face, which hopefully now we all got used to it. And but initially, certainly that was a barrier for many groups. The delay in response from local organization was a big challenge. A lot of CCF groups collaborate with other organizations and work together with other CCF groups or local councils and schools. But we know there was furloughed staff, people were working from home. So communication was much more difficult, which resulted in delays in some of the projects. And probably one of the biggest challenges of the project that worked with schools was the fact that they just couldn't really deliver their activities because the schools were closed. And more specifically, in terms of promoting sustainable transport, during the pandemic, promoting the use of public transport was not really something that CCF transport groups felt that is possible and relevant for the situation because of the restrictions and the advice given to avoid places with many people and avoid interaction with too many people. Same refers to promoting car sharing schemes and fuel efficient driving. And these are all activities that CCF groups historically have been promoting and people have been engaging. So now it's really a big challenge for groups to engage people in that. Another barrier that came from a good place was the increase in interest of electric bikes caused that some of the suppliers really couldn't meet the demand in some parts of Scotland. And then another very specific barrier for the CCF projects is how to measure the behavior change, and how to measure to what extent that behavior change was impacted by their project or by the restrictions imposed due to COVID-19. So this is something that a lot of the CCF groups will have to have a look and see how to come up with an answer. Although there were so many barriers, and these are just the most common, the most fascinating thing for us when looking at reports and speaking with CCF groups was that the mindset was, okay, yes, it's challenging, but what we can do to help, let's do something to help. Everybody felt really mobilized to help their community, and that was really, really inspiring to see, not only for the CCF transport groups, but for all CCF groups, really. And from that, yeah, there were some opportunities that came from this very difficult time. The online delivery, which initially was challenging, at the same time allowed many groups to reach people that might not attend live sessions otherwise, but also allow them to develop online resources that will be there as a legacy of their project and will be available to access by the community beyond the funding. In general, more people started being more active, which was a good opportunity for transport projects to really engage with new participants and highlight the health, but also the environmental benefits of active travel. And then the fact that the activities were in a smaller scale provided a better quality of services. So the focus was on better quality rather than quantity. And many groups provided, for instance, personalized journey planning, which hopefully beyond the pandemic would help people really commute to work or every day in a more sustainable way. And then the link between active travel and mental health was very clearly highlighted during the pandemic, which groups as well take the opportunity to speak about the environmental aspect and also to engage people in low carbon behaviors such as active travel. It was fantastic to see how many of the CCF transport groups that have bike hire scheme supported key workers by providing them with access to bikes so they can commute safely to work. So that's once again another opportunity to engage new people who potentially in the future would continue using this as their mode of transport. And then there was a very high demand for bike repairs and bike libraries, which was great. These are very popular activities for CCF groups. And some transport projects noted that after the lockdown and when things kind of got back to, a bit normal, people still were interested in lead rides, which potentially could be indication that this behavior change could sustain beyond the pandemic. And this is really one of the main things that CCF groups and the transport projects need to see how to really sustain these positive behaviors coming from identified during the COVID-19, like working from home and just active travel. And so what is ahead really is making sure that we achieve a really green recovery. We focus on how to really support investing in sustainable travel, but also make sure that this transition is just and it's fair, and that all transport inequalities are tackled. Because during the pandemic, it was very clear that there were transport inequalities. So this is what is ahead for all of us, and but the transport CCF groups have a big role to play in. So yeah, thank you very much. This was just a very brief review of what's been going on with our CCF projects. But right now, I'll just stop sharing and we'll give the microphone to Barbara, who has also a lot to share and some inspiring stories. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Magdalena.
Okay, great. Thank you, Magdalena. Great to see what's happening and how people are adapting. And as we'll see in some of the examples that I've brought today, they'll touch on some of the things that you picked up there. So yeah, really interesting. So I'm just going to share my screen as well. Okay, so I'm just going to start by introducing Sustrans, just in case there are people in the room who aren't aware of us. We're most well known for the National Cycle Network, but we do a lot of other things as well, particularly in terms of providing new infrastructure for cycling and walking in Scotland. We in other parts of the UK as well, but in Scotland particularly, we manage a fund called Places for Everyone, which comes from Transport Scotland, and it's specifically for local authority and other public and community organisations to apply for funding specifically to introduce better walking and cycling infrastructure. But we also do a lot of other things in terms of trying to encourage people to walk and cycle more. And it's basically our vision to create healthier places and happier people by making it easier for people to walk and cycle. The team that I'm in specifically is the communities team. So we are there to support communities to run and develop active travel in a few different ways. So we work closely with the infrastructure and design team to work with the communities to get them travelling actively alongside new infrastructure. And in the last year, I've been working in North Edinburgh, West Edinburgh and Woodside in Glasgow. This is the first year of our team, so we'll hopefully build on that and introduce projects in other areas of Scotland going forward. We're also actively working with local groups to help them to deliver services, and we want to get a better understanding of how our work can support them. So we've commissioned the Scottish Community Development Centre to research how we can better support community organisations around Scotland. And the other thing that we're doing is actively working with our project partners to highlight the importance of best practice engagement and co-creation with communities, and highlighting the value that that good practice in code design and production can bring to projects. But what I'm going to speak about today is actually 3 organisations and what they've been doing recently to introduce active travel in a way that isn't the focus of their project, but supports the projects that they're doing. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Pilton Retreat, a charitable organisation providing self-contained play environment in a rural location, taking groups of young people and youth workers or families from the north of Edinburgh out to a place in Ratho. The second one I'll talk about is Empty Kitchens, Full Hearts, as a volunteer initiative rescuing surplus food and turning it into free healthy meals for people in need, and they deliver daily meal bags of 3 meals to families all across Edinburgh every day. And Score Scotland, a social justice organisation in Wester Hales. Full name is Strengthening Communities for Race Equality Scotland. And they work with ethnic minorities and communities to provide activities around social cohesion, community integration and improved quality of life. So I'll just go straight into it. These are all really fabulous projects, so I hope that you enjoy them. So Pilton Retreat, for many years, young people, families and youth workers were taken from the Muirhouse Pilton area of Edinburgh out to the retreat, which is just near Ratho, if people are familiar with Edinburgh, the surrounding area. You'll know that's a distance of about 8 to 10 miles. Now, in 2018, the old bus needed replaced, and they didn't have the funds to do this. So they were faced with the choice of trying to raise funds to get a new bus, or to look at alternative options. And because the distance isn't that far, they decided to try taking groups out to the retreat by bike and public transport instead of by bus. And they teamed up with a local social enterprise called My Adventure to do this, who provided bikes and cycle ride leaders for the trips to and from the retreat. So we've just got a couple of images here of the young people on their way from North Edinburgh out towards Ratho. So the young people actually really enjoyed this experience, and it's now part of the experience of going to the retreat, more than the trip by bus was previously. And in the most recent round of CCF funding, Pilton Retreat were given funds for a new growing project at the retreat to raise climate awareness and teach people to grow their own food. Unfortunately, this was slightly interrupted by COVID because they couldn't take the same number of people out through the summer, but what they did instead was give people in North Edinburgh a plant to look after that would have been planted out at the retreat, and then that was taken out at a later date. And we are currently in discussions with them about supporting them to get a cargo bike for moving equipment and plants or vegetables to and from the retreat. So moving on to Empty Kitchens, Full Hearts. This was started as a direct response to the COVID crisis, and just in the last few months, they've provided over 300,000 free nutritious meals to people facing food insecurity, as well as tackling food poverty. They're hugely motivated by sustainability. So aside from the odd onion or two, all of their ingredients are donated surplus food, and they've rescued over 100 tonnes of food waste. And this is one of their volunteers helping to prepare the fresh meals, and the bags packed, ready to go. So each bag contains something for breakfast, something for lunch, something for dinner, and a fruit or a snack. And these are delivered, no questions asked, across Edinburgh for anybody who needs them. Now, as well as the food sustainability, they also place a strong emphasis on carbon neutral logistics. And a third of their deliveries are made by people on bicycles or by walking. And the majority of their food donations are delivered by a fleet of cargo bikes overnight as well. And as well as providing this great service, they're also a really social productive space for over 500 volunteers. And they have also just acquired 3 cargo bikes, and we're in discussions with them to have people trained so that they can increase their bike deliveries further with the use of the cargo bikes, and replace some of the car journeys for deliveries that are still happening. So another really great project. And finally, I'm just going to talk a little bit about Score Scotland. So the cycling activity that they do is part of their Green Futures project, which is includes cycling, doctor bike, a community fridge, and upcycling. And it's funded again by the Climate Challenge Fund to raise awareness and support action by local Black ethnic minority communities and majority communities to address the causes and effects of climate change. So during lockdown, they have been providing bikes to key workers and staff members as part of the Big Bike Revival Key Workers project. And from May, they also began regular monthly doctor bike sessions, which changed to weekly in September, October, due to high demands for getting bikes repaired. And the additional funding through the cycle repair scheme, the £50, helped to get bikes up and running again. In addition to that, they've also been running Play Together on Pedal sessions in the last couple of months, and they've also had a huge amount of interest from African women wanting to learn to ride for complete beginners, and 3 of those who took part have purchased bikes since, and since the beginning of August they've run over 40 sessions with more than 20 women in bikeability level 1 and level 2. And they've also been running some lead rides from the west of Edinburgh to the Meadows from 2 different venues, which just shows the ladies that are taking part the safe routes that they can take, and the gives them the confidence and motivation to try these journeys themselves. And even though in some days the weather has been pretty bad, they've had really positive feedback, and the people involved have really enjoyed these sessions. So just as a quick summary, projects involving walking, cycling, wheeling don't need to have getting people to walk, cycle or wheel as the main objective. They can be about other things, but just using active travel as a way to meet those other objectives. And I meant to say at the beginning as well, these 3 examples are just 3 from lots of different projects all across Scotland. There's loads of community groups doing similar things to get people being active while meeting other objectives. But we are here, the communities team, to provide advice and support. So please feel free to drop us an email on communities.team@sustrans.org.uk, and we're happy to provide any support or advice that we're able to get your projects going, or to help you make them more sustainable and keep them running for longer. And that's me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barbara and Magdalena, for your presentations. So we've now got around 10 minutes for a question and answer session. So feel free to ask your questions in the chat box, or if you would rather, just click to share your audio and video, and you can hop on camera and ask your question. But we do have some, excuse me, we do have some time. Or even any points you have to make as well. Oh, we've got Joseph, so I'll just get Joseph on the camera.
Hello.
Joe, sorry.
Hi, Joe.
Hi, Claire, Magdalena. It's nice to see you both.
Nice to see
you too.
I was actually just your thoughts on. I think it's been a really interesting year for the bike project at St Paul's. We've always kind of maintained that the biggest issue around cycling uptake in the northeast of Glasgow and in Glasgow generally has been that the streets aren't safe, and it was really exciting to see rolled out across Scotland and across Glasgow these temporary cycle paths, and a lot of discussion about them becoming permanent, and that's been a really exciting thing, as well as seeing this huge uptake in people cycling. But I think over the past few months across the country, we've seen quite a nasty backlash towards that. I'm sure a lot of it's from quite a small but very vocal minority, but I'm just wondering to see, particularly because you guys are working across the country and with yourself, Barbara, and Sustrans, what your perspective on that is.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I mean, there was that huge sort of initial surge at the sort of beginning of lockdown, where there were cars and on the roads, and then as the car traffic has sort of come back, the cycling again has kind of dropped back a little bit. Yeah, I mean, I think it's all about how we engage and how we have those conversations about the possibility of things becoming permanent, and also about learning, because it might be that in some cases what was put in as a temporary measure isn't really the right design or the right way for it to have been introduced. So just making sure that we take that on board and recognise that, okay, we want something here, but maybe what's been put in, because it was all done very quickly, isn't quite what it needs to be, and reassess that. So I think, particularly with Glasgow, they've made a commitment to do a full consultation on all of the temporary measures that were put in before deciding whether to take them out, whether to make them permanent, or whether to make change, or how they might be changed in the process of making them permanent. And it would be great to see, not all local authorities have committed to doing it so extensively. I think there will definitely be some that consulted on and stay as permanent in some form or another, but there are other ones that were introduced that have just had such bad feedback, or like that backlash that you were talking about, that the local authorities are just taking them out already.
Yeah.
After they've been in for a very short period, which is a real shame, because it doesn't really give people the opportunity for them to be embedded and to get used to them. It does take a bit of time before people kind of adapt their behaviour to take into account these changes. So yeah, I think it's an ongoing process.
Great. Thank you.
I think one of the things that I've certainly seen as well, when going back to that, having temporary cycle lanes and the reaction that came out from people, the very angry comments on social media that cyclists don't pay road tax. And that's the common misconception. There is no road tax. It's the vehicle excise duty. So people are paying tax on their vehicles and not it doesn't go to funding our roads. That comes through taxation and council tax, which obviously cyclists will be paying themselves, and likely cyclists are also car drivers too. So I think it's just addressing misconceptions in those areas that get people really riled up. If they just understood the systems and stuff, maybe they wouldn't get so worked up about it.
Okay, thanks. Well, let someone else ask a question.
You can do, Joe. Good to see you.
You too. Bye.
I think we've got a question from Laura here. So Laura's saying, we've heard that there's a big Sustrans project being looked at for Inverclyde. How can community-led grassroots organisations get involved with these sorts of larger projects? Good question, Laura. Thank you.
Yeah, really good question. So I think Sustrans as an organisation is looking to improve the way that we communicate in terms of the large projects that are going in. And the easiest way to get involved would be just to contact us. We can speak to the project team and see where the work that you do might intersect with the project. And yeah, it'd be great to hear from anybody who's aware of projects near them that want to get involved in some way. We're really happy to have that conversation. Yeah, if you drop an email to communities.team at sustrans.org.uk, we can see who it is that's working on that project and put you in touch, definitely.
I think, yeah, it's definitely important for community groups to link up, and, linking up infrastructure projects with behaviour change projects is the key to, especially like using cycle paths and, walking, wheeling paths, whatever the mode of transport is you use on these paths, then it is hugely important to engage with that behaviour change as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I would just add to that as well, that having the input of community organisations at the design stage, before that infrastructure goes in, I see as being really important, because the people that live in and use the area have got insights into potential issues or opportunities that the project team might not be aware of. So really important.